What's up, you guys? It's awsome 32 here, bringing you guys a brand new video today. Yes, I know I've not posted in a few days, and I apologize for that. I've been busy with school, and I've just really been trying to get acclimated, been trying to keep my grades up, and all that fun stuff, but I know you guys don't want to hear about that. You want to hear about the topic that I have for you today. And today I wanted to talk about not necessarily rogue matchups, but meta calls, and rogue decks in general, I should say, not rogue matchups, but rogue decks and meta calls. In case you don't know what a meta call is per se, a meta call is when you pick a deck, it can be any deck, that is not necessarily the best deck, but is, and in the eyes of most players in the community at the time, see it as the best deck to go against the other deck. So kind of like a rogue deck, but not just rogue in the sense of you're running complete anti-meta and just shutting your opponent down. No, a meta call is when you look at the deck and you say, this deck beats all these tier 1 decks, and at least it should, because it's supposed to be quote-unquote meta call. So you take the deck, you play it, and you test it out to see if you feel that it's the right deck for you to play, since everybody's saying it's the best meta call for that moment in time. Now, one deck that is, I'm going to say right now, is a pretty bold statement, but is usually always a good meta call in any format, and I say this especially now because of the new Monarch support that we've been getting, and that is Frog Monarch. Not just frogs, but the Frog Monarch deck in general. And I guess you could throw frogs in general in there. I'm just going to use this frog build. This is a very old frog build that I did on my channel. I did a deck profile of a long time ago that I got from TCG Player. If you guys want to go check that out, just look for it on my channel. It's probably like some sort of Frog Monarch deck profile or something is what it's labeled as with the world or something. This is a very old build, but typically, you'd have Monarchs and everything. I'm just showing this build because I don't have a Frog Monarch deck build offhand in my collection of decks on Dueling Network. But you get the point of the idea. You're still running the lads and the frogs and all that fun stuff. So why is this deck in particular always a good meta call? And that's why I'm using it as an example, because of the fact that it's always a good meta call pretty much in any format. And the main reasons, honestly, is just because it's always good at what it does, and it's very consistent at what it does, and it has a lot of neat tricks, which is just a side note, not to mention. The fact that this deck is able to drop cards like Lad and is very innovative in the way it works makes this deck always a great meta call pretty much for any format. Like, ever since the deck was released, people have seen this as a good, consistent deck, and it's a very good meta call because of that. If a deck is able to do consistently what it's supposed to do, in this case dropping big beat 6 and shutting your opponent down out of plays, that's a good consistent deck and a good meta call in my eyes. And especially because of the fact it runs a lot of the good rank 2 and rank 1 Xyz monsters, i.e. Dark Mist, Slacker Magician, Herald of Pure Light, Gotchi, Daigusto. You guys get the gist. The fact that this deck in particular is able to abuse these cards and also is able to maintain its consistency and maintain its advantage is very good. It's also able to run cards, like Enemy Controller and Creature Swap to sort of manipulate your opponent's plays so that they may think that they're safe. They have a big board setup of, like, say, a Draco Sack, a Big Eye, and other things like that, and then you end up going Standby Phase, Econ, Tribute off a Treeborn, take one of their cards, get back out Treeborn, and now you have 2 monsters on your side of the field to sack off for Lad. I remember one of the really cool plays I did with this deck when the deck was first released, when the Frog Monarch concept itself was first released, was I had like 2 enemy controllers in my hand. My opponent had 2 big beat sticks on the field, I forget what they were, and I brought out Treeborn, used Econ, Tribute to take his monster, then I used my other Econ, because Treeborn still comes back out in the same face, took his other monster, brought out my Treeborn again, so I now have 3 monsters on the field, and back then, some people were using Obelisk the Tormentor and or the Winged Dragon of Ra, because you could easily get 3 or more monsters out on the board at a time. So then I just sacked off all 3 for Obelisk, and I proceeded to win that turn. Very, very, very good and very dirty plays, I have to say, with this deck. And especially now with the new Monarch support, we're not just limited to using Soul Exchange. We can also use cards like the Monarch Stormforth. If we really want to, we can use the other Monarch cards like the Monarch Stormforth. Whatever that Monarch Continuous spell card is, I forget the name. I just pulled it out of my tin, out of one of the mega tins that I bought today. And you can use that card if you really want to as a search power for the deck. One of the other more recent things that we have seen from the Frog deck in general where is it? Would be Desfrog OTK. I'm just trying to find it here in my collection of stuff. Here we go, Desfrog OTK. This is a more recent build of frogs that, as you guys know, topped, I believe, is European Worlds. And this really shows that frogs are a very good meta call. And it also shows that the deck can be very innovative. The guy took the frog deck and he looked at it and he saw the other cards in the meta, and he realized that cards like this can go hand in hand. People really overlook the fact that Rodent Totem's name is treated as Des Frog while it's face up on the field. People overlooked that in Dupe Frog, and I believe it's in Flip Flop Frog. No, not Flip Flop, but in Dupe, Rodent Totem, and yeah, just Dupe Frog and Rodent Totem. People really overlook those because they thought, oh, Des Frog, I'm never going to use it. It's a 1900 beater that does nothing for me. I don't plan on fusing into 3DS Frog. There's no reason for me to run this. Well, Des Croaking kind of changed people's ideas on that. And on top of that, he has a very good Xyz lineup, and he really was able to abuse Ghost Trick, not Succubus, or whatever. I honestly don't know what it's called. I just call it Succubus because that's what everybody calls it. And he set up a very good strategy, and that strategy got him his invite to Worlds. And I have to say, I applaud him for using this deck. He was finally able to find an exploit with just the simple term, this card's even treated as Death Frog while face up on the field. And that's really cool. And on top of that, keep in mind that that's a continuous effect. So even if your opponent uses Skill Drain or something, you can still go Death Croaking when you have 3 Rodent Toads on the board. So that's pretty nice. And destroying all your opponent's cards is really nice too. Now, granted, I can see that this particular build, I should say, isn't as good because of the fact that Shaddolls are running around. So if they have mid-rash, for one thing, you're not going to be able to get out multiple Rodent Totems at a time. You're going to have to go, normal summon a Rodent Totem, then go Infernal Reckless Summon to drop 3 Death Frogs at once, and then go Death Croaking. And then even then, you're still going to have to deal with the mid-rash. So this deck has definitely dropped in popularity. You're essentially just going to have to rely on your breakthrough skills, unfortunately, unless you can be able to get Succubus off, or So Cute Boss, whatever it is you guys want to call it. I apologize for my mispronunciation. Whatever it is play you're trying to go for, and try and beat them that way. And that's the one thing I really like about this particular build that I feel is even in some ways a better meta call than Frog Monarch in general. Because yes, Frog Monarchs have the ability to use Monarch Storm 4th and Soul Exchange and all that, and they have access to the Monarch engine and Lad and Jinzo and all these other cards that really shut down your opponent and shut down pretty much every deck in the meta, hence why it's called a good meta call for every format, because it shuts almost any deck in the whole entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Down once they have their board set up. So Cute Boss, and this particular build, I feel is better because of the fact that So Cute Boss literally locks your opponent out of summoning any monsters. You drop 3 of these, and already your opponent's lost 3 monster zones, essentially. In case you don't know what So Cute Boss does, is you detach Xyz material, and you add up all the attack of all your Ghost Tricks. So in this case, let's say you have 3 So Cute Boss on the field. You're going to add up 14 times 3. You can then pop any monster on the field with attack equal to or less than that. So even a Dragon Ruler is going to be a lot weaker than 14 times 3. Since you can use each effect, or since you can use each So Cute Boss in the same turn, and if they have 3 monsters, you can detach 1 from each So Cute Boss, and then pop 3 of their monsters. And then they can't use those zones as long as So Cute Boss is on the field, which is really, really nice. And while you control another Ghost Trick monster, your opponent cannot target this card for attack. So if you drop 3 of them on board, or even 2 of them on board, you, in theory, have a dupe block. Or, I'm sorry, not in theory, you do have a dupe block. So, why did I want to make this discussion video about meta calls? Because meta calls right now are very essential in the game, and if you can be able to figure out the best meta call for you, and you can capitalize on your playstyle with it and really figure out the ins and outs of the deck, then you're going to have a very good chance of doing well in this format if you can't afford the top tier decks like Shaddolls, Yang Zing, Mermail, etc. Anything else that's running in the format, or running around in the format that you cannot afford for whatever reason. And meta calls are also very good to pick up as well because they're typically cheap. Like, this doesn't just include Frog Monarch. You can look at other older decks like Chamburn is a very good meta call. Even though there are cards like Trap Stun and Royal Decree and Wiretap, if you're a good enough player and you don't like use your MSTs stupidly, you can work around those cards. And if you know your deck well enough, in this case we're talking about Chamburn, if you can play Chamburn well enough, yes, there is actually some form of thinking behind the deck, you guys, when you're trying to work around wiretaps and all that fun stuff, then you're going to be fine. And also, you know, setting up your side deck is essential as well, and that goes for any deck. Even Gladiator Beasts, to an extent, have been kind of a meta call for people, because I know, like, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 formats ago, whenever the new format would begin, people would always go back to Glads. Why? Because it was very consistent in what it did. It was very good at what it did too. The fact that you could run all these other kind of Glads to basically do anything that you wanted them to do. Darius got you back another Glad, then you could contact fuse in that same turn. Rotari could banish anything that you wanted to banish out of your opponent's graveyard. If they had, let's say, a Necrogardna, you could banish it. If they had a 4th Lightsworn, you could banish it. Myrmelio had its own popping ability. Your opponent had a big monster you couldn't get rid of? Okay, Myrmelio. Sekitor, you need to get multiple monsters on board? Sekitor is your guy. And then they also had a big trap lineup, kind of like Gadgets do in a way. How Gadgets kind of just like slow roll and grind out and make you use your resources and simplify the game state. That's what Gladiator Beasts were able to do as well, and they did it very well because of cards like War Chariot, and they were able to use other cards that didn't really hurt them too much, i.e. Safe Zone. They could even use Vanity's Emptiness now because of just how much they're not hurt by the card. They could also run cards that could stall, like Wabaku, just to help stall for time and figure out a play. And the deck is still to this day is very innovative, in my opinion. So that's pretty much it for this video, you guys. Let me know what you think about meta calls in the comments below. And meta calls in general. Rogue decks, like I said, are pretty much the same thing, but they're more anti-meta based in the sense of their only goal is to shut you out of plays and just not let you play Yu-Gi-Oh! Kind of like how Self-Destruct Button was, but that was more like a troll deck. Anyways, so I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you watch it all the way to the end, please leave a like or a favorite, and let me know in the comments below about what you think about meta calls. Let me know what you're running right now in the format. I'm very interested to see what you guys are running. I'm interested to see, you know, what the general consensus of my audience is. Like, are most of you guys running Shaddolls? In that case, I know that most of you guys are competitive, or are most of you guys taking a break from this format, or most of you guys casual? I don't know. So let me know in the comments about all that. Thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.